know that you went to school here locally at RPI and started your career in development and software and have a couple of really cool stories of the companies that you founded. I'd love for you to tell them a little bit about that journey and those two companies and where they are today.
Thanks for having me. So I'm originally from South America, from Venezuela, but I came to the area in 2000, and so I've been in upstate longer than I ever was in Venezuela, so I consider myself now part of upstate. But I originally came to go to school. I went to RPI and studied computer science and math. And after graduating, I was thinking what to do, and that kind of led to working at a small local company here in Saratoga, where I kind of fell in love with the area and knew that I always wanted to start a business, and said, like, why not do it here? And so I started my first business with my with my roommate in college, Sinclair Schuler, and it was at the time a fairly novel idea. We've been always in technology, but this was early on when cloud was first starting to take off, and we wanted to tackle a pretty adventurous opportunity. And so we set ourselves to raise some money, and we were able to close some exciting money from different VCs. Our very first money came from a VC that's no longer in the area, but it was High Peak Ventures. And then from then went on to get money from some very large funds as well. Ended up raising about $65 million in venture funding for that business, and eventually sold the IP for that in mid-2018. That was a product company. We had focused on building cloud technology for large enterprises, in particular large-scale platforms, general-purpose platforms. When selling that business, we were trying to figure out what to do next, and wanted to give it a shot at a slightly different business. And so we didn't raise venture funding for the second one, and we decided to start a consulting business. And that consulting business was focused on helping companies build platforms. And so we're the first one. We were building our own platform and selling it and going to market. The second one was a services business where we were helping our customers build their own platforms. Obviously, we had a ton of experience doing this. We had done it for the past almost 15 years. Few people in the space had invested as much time and money as we had, other than companies like Microsoft and Google and some very large players. And so that kind of gave us a unique perspective on how to do that. And we just sold that business at the end of April. And so it was a really great journey. It grew pretty quickly. When we started, I'd say we started with about 4 or 5 people. By the end of our first year, we were already 15. Then the pandemic hit, and so we weren't sure what was going to happen, but we continued to grow quite a bit through the pandemic, and we sold it roughly around 200 people just earlier this year.
So with the sale of Nuvalence to EY, and you're working with them at this point, we talked a little bit about a few of the use cases that you had worked with clients to develop some platforms, particularly around generative AI and just being such an explosion of new capability. Can you walk us through a couple of use cases that were particularly exciting or that you were proud of?
Sure. So I mentioned that our focus has always been in building platforms. And when AI kind of came into the scene, not really just coming into the scene, but there was this re-enlightened interest in it because of generative AI. We quickly pivoted and started making sure that all of the platform work that we were doing was really leveraging AI in a variety of different ways. Most of us probably use AI in ways that we don't even recognize, whether it is around crafting an email or looking at pictures, analyzing documents, and so it's been part of our society for quite some time. But now it's more in our face with some tools like ChatGPT and a couple of other popular tools that have kind of come to market in recent months. But to give you an example of a variety of different use cases, some that I always like to point out are around public sector work that we did. So part of building platforms requires building things at a massive scale, and public sector is a type of client that sometimes doesn't have the appeal as some other more popular brands, but their scale requires to operate at a platform scale. And so we did a lot of work for a variety of different government agencies, in particular in the state, where we implemented several unique or interesting AI capabilities. One such example was for the Department of Motor Vehicle. I'm sure nobody here likes to go to the DMV. It's kind of been like a treacherous, terrible experience for most. But when COVID hit, most agencies for state agencies had to close down, and a couple of things happened as part of that. So one, the state started losing a significant amount of revenue, but more importantly, citizens of the state were left off without being able to take advantage of some of the services that those state agencies provided, DMV being no different than most others. And so for people that needed to renew their registrations, driver's license, permits, and so on and so forth, they couldn't do it. And so the DMV kind of like embarked in a multi-year initiative to start digitizing some of these services. And so today you can now go to a website for the DMV and be able to process most of the transactions that you would normally do at the DMV without ever having to go to the office. And it all started with a digital intake process. And what I mean by that is this kind of like journey that allowed citizens of the state to be able to fill in an application in a way that it's pretty friendly and usable, and then have somebody at the state level, a motor vehicle representative, adjudicate that request. But many things that happen as you're filling in applications and as you're targeting a broad audience, as you may imagine, lives in the state, there's a lot of different things that can go wrong. And so you may ask for some information and people provide the wrong information, not willingly, but just by mistake. And so there's a lot of time that it's wasted in that back and forth process of getting the right information. And so an example where we leverage AI to really improve the life of both motor vehicle representatives and the citizens was in cases where you were applying for whatever transaction it was. Maybe it was a new license registration or a permit, and you needed to provide a set of documents as part of that application, whether it was for proof of identity or proof of residence or so on and so forth. And the state has this approach, this point system that depending on the documents you provide, you may need to provide one or more documents to prove who you are. And so we leveraged AI in a variety of use cases for this to help, one, identify that people were providing the right document. And so if for some reason you needed to provide a passport and you provided a driver's license instead, we can prompt you and say, hey, it looks like you might have provided the wrong document, because we could recognize with AI that the document was not quite it. Also using AI, we can recognize the quality of the documents. And so sometimes people would take a picture of a document, it would be blurry. And so we would let them know up front that, hey, it's likely that your document is going to get rejected because it's not of the right quality. And then last, another aspect is we leverage AI to extract information from documents. And so if you can imagine, if you upload something like a 1099 form or a tax form, there's a lot of information that's already provided as part of that form, and so we can extract all of that from the document and pre-fill the information for users as well. And so that's, a sample set of use cases where you could leverage AI, both in this case to help citizens know that they were either providing the right or wrong information, and then on the other side, on the adjudication side, to tell motor vehicle representatives that, hey, maybe this document is not the right one, or the quality of this document is not correct, and so on and so forth.
So one of the examples that we had talked about was around sentiment analysis, which I thought was so interesting. And if any of us have done research and you're trying to understand the qualitative side of your research, if you've got objective, quantitative data, that's one thing. But qualitative verbatims, so many times we put them in a document and you just read them at the end. Can you tell me how AI actually you could do this sentiment analysis and pump out something a little more useful?
Yeah, that's a great question. Another great example. So to provide more context, one of the things that we did for a different agency was they were trying to be able to understand feedback about the services from the state, and many times. The way you can best action on feedback is if the feedback is properly structured. But this is also a very somewhat myopic view of what the possible feedback can be. And so you may be asking some very specific questions, and it's like, tell me about your experience with X. Give me a rating 1 to 5 of what it was. And so you can only get certain value from that type of feedback that the creator of the form might have had to figure out, what you were trying to provide feedback around. And so it's valuable. You can really act on it because it's all standardized, but there's only so much value that you can extract on it. And so one of the things that this agency wanted to try to do was to provide somewhat of a free form field to provide just open feedback about whatever was it that you wanted to talk about or provide feedback to the agency. Obviously, the challenge with this is that unstructured feedback is hard to act on. Somebody has to read it, somebody has to classify it, somebody has to figure out what it was that they were trying to provide feedback about. And so it's very tedious to get the value that you can out of that feedback, even though it's very rich. It's very context rich. And so what we did is, leveraging AI, we could apply sentiment analysis to the feedback and be able to extract the pieces of information that the agency wanted to know, whether whether the feedback was positive, neutral, or negative, whether what type of feedback it was, the category of feedback, whether it was around their product, their services, their agents, the time to resolution, and a variety of other things that we can just do naturally by applying AI and large language models in particular, so generative AI, to be able to action up on that feedback. And not just action on the feedback, but route the feedback appropriately based on the type of feedback that it was. And so they were able to get the value that they would normally be able to get from structured feedback from in an unstructured form, while also getting all the rich context that would normally come from it.
Yeah, thank you. So these are, obviously very helpful examples, feel a little bit benign, super useful. But the question around ethics in AI obviously comes up a lot. We've talked about this, I think, maybe last year a little bit as well. Can you talk to me about, your thoughts around ethics in AI, this concept of keeping a human in the loop and how important that is? And then if you have any sort of boundaries that you've said as a developer, I'll go this far, but I have sort of an ethical or a safety, restriction I've kind of put on where I would go with the technology.
Yeah, it's a great question. So you mentioned this human in the loop concept. That's a technique that it's used for a variety of reasons, and so I'll go into a little bit more detail on that, and then I'll talk about the ethics aspect as well. So maybe starting with the ethics aspect, certainly in the public sector, but it's not just in public sector, but in particular in public sector, we wanted to make sure that one, we weren't, or biases were not being they weren't affecting the outcome of some of the decisions being made by the models in either filtering people out or biasing towards a certain set of population. And so that was very important decisioning and considerations early on when trying to decide whether we were going to leverage certain AI capabilities to do one thing or another. And so one example of that is, even though we leverage AI to potentially tell users that, hey, you might have uploaded the wrong document, or this document doesn't seem like it's correct, or perhaps it's fraudulent, we wanted to give them the information that's what the system had determined, but we didn't want to prevent them from being able to move forward had they really chose to move forward with that information. And so we wanted to tell them, we want to give them the tools to perhaps correct it real time, but we didn't want to make a decision that would prevent them or rule them out from continuing on, such that if for some reason the model had identified things incorrectly, they could still move forward. And so that's an example where responsible use of AI, at least in public sector. There's a variety of cases. I think we'll talk in a second. I think AI is really changing significantly almost any industry, and so every industry will have to have some different considerations around the proper use of AI and how it may affect the consumers of that within their industry, but it's very important to do that. Another consideration is that our current AI models, in particular generative AI, and so I'll just explain that a little bit more. But so AI has been around for quite a while, but you hear a lot about AI recently, and most people classify AI with this new quote-unquote incarnation or capabilities of AI called generative AI, because it's a type of AI that can generate new content. And it does that by analyzing a huge amount of data, which previously wasn't available and wasn't possible. We both didn't have the compute capacity that we have today and the availability of resources to analyze the data at the scale that we can today. But these new models are able to create answers based on general knowledge that they're trained on. They're very good for certain things, like maybe creating an essay or giving you a summary report about something, but they're very bad for others. They don't work as well, like maybe computing a simple math problem. These generative AI models are not very good at. Many other things that are better for that. But one of the things that happen is that they don't know what they're good or bad about. They just know how to respond to an answer. And most times what would happen is that if you ask a question about something that they're not good about, it gives you a very confident answer that it's totally wrong. And so they have these things that are called hallucinations that you need to be mindful about and aware about when you're building systems that leverage AI and this capability, because you may be asking a question about something very important and the model is just responding very confidently about something that's totally wrong. And so when building systems that leverage AI, you just need to be mindful about some of those limitations and the capabilities and how to apply it correctly. I think I answered both questions.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. So for the business leaders in the room, if they're thinking about problem sets or challenges that they have that might be able to be solved with AI, do you have any guidance around maybe industry specifics or problem sets where you find it to be particularly useful, and for investors kind of looking at companies that are trying to use AI to solve problems? Any guidance or thoughts for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that I think that AI is really going to change in a fairly significant way almost every industry. Certainly service industries, but almost every industry will be either disruptive or significantly affected by AI. And so you can either leverage AI in a way that it's helpful for you to do things, or your core services that you used to deliver may be highly disrupted by AI. And so, at a minimum, I think that for the investors in the room or folks looking to make investments, if you're investing in new companies and you're either not considering how AI affects the space, or how you can leverage AI to really do things more efficiently or better, then you're doing yourself a disservice, and you'll likely find yourself in trouble in a few years. But for folks looking to start leveraging AI or how they can take advantage of it, I guess the best advice is just by starting. There's a lot of tools nowadays. Again, you probably use many. If you use Word or Gmail or many popular products nowadays, there's lots of AI embedded in it, and it's primarily around helping you craft a message. And so it thinks what are the things that you want to say, and so it suggests like the next sentence or the next words. That's an example. But if you want to become more active in trying to understand the capabilities of AI and leveraging it, a very popular tool that has been available for several months now is ChatGPT. So for those that might have not heard it, ChatGPT is this tool that was created by a company called OpenAI, and it's really one of the ones that kind of like gave this new quote-unquote revolution to the capabilities of large language models and generative AI. And it's almost like a search engine, or you can use it as a search engine, but you can ask it any question you want. And the way it works is it's this model that's been trained on a huge amount of data, and you can ask it to perform certain tasks. And so I would recommend that folks start to use it as you might have been using Google before. And so if you're searching for a question on something and you're trying to find research about the question, you can start by perhaps asking ChatGPT to give you an answer. And the way it works is that it doesn't link you to websites where you may be able to find the answer, and provides a ranked list of websites that you then use to find the answer by doing further research. It works by distilling all of the information that it knows about that particular topic and crafting an answer for you. And so you can then interact to ask further questions and get further answers and refinements on what you're doing. So that's one very simple way that will start to open your mind about the capabilities of AI, and then how you may be able to leverage it in other aspects of what you do day to day.
Yeah, thank you. So closing question, and then I'm going to open up to anyone else in the room. What are you most excited about as you look at the future of AI and maybe projects that you're getting involved in? As you look ahead, what gets you excited? What are you most excited to work on next?
So, I mean, we have an opportunity to work on some really exciting projects. Obviously, right now, AI is very top of mind for a huge amount of folks. I would say that probably 95% of all engagements that we do have AI as a key component of that work. Obviously, self-selecting because that's our specialty, but like even compared to a few years ago, when you survey the market and ask what all the executives on big companies are thinking about doing, AI is top of mind. Either how it reshapes their industry, how it changes the way they do things, how they can do things significantly more efficiently or not. I'll provide an example use case in a second about that. But one particular area that I'm pretty excited about in the context of AI is this notion of what's called autonomous agents. And these agents are basically small programs that leverage AI to kind of like ask questions and answer the questions themselves, and continue doing this loop so that they can self-sufficiently solve problems. We're still a bit far from that being like a reality for sophisticated problems, but this is advancing so rapidly and so quickly that I think that within a year you'll see significant advances in this area. And so that's one area that I'm pretty excited about. The example I was going to give, I mentioned that AI is a big disruptor and enabler for almost any industry. And mentioned earlier that we just sold our company to Ernst & Young. So we sold the company to Ernst & Young for a few reasons, but when we first started our relationship with them was as a customer. They were a customer of ours where they recognized their industry being significantly disrupted by AI. And so for those who don't know, Ernst & Young is a pretty large company, 450,000 employees worldwide. They have a variety of different focus areas, but the big focus area is on accounting, auditing, tax support, and then they also do a variety of other consulting services. And so for us as a tech company, we weren't thinking that we'd be acquired by a big four auditing firm. But when we first started working with them, they recognize how disruptive AI could be for their space. As an auditor and consultant, primarily their work being, they recognize that they'd be able to do significantly more work with less amount of people in very different ways. And so I'll give you an example that really kind of like drove it home for them and us, and what kind of like helped catapult the decision that they needed to make a strategic bet on us and buy us ultimately. And so when we engaged with them, they wanted us to help them understand how AI could help their business. And we first engaged to understand, what aspects of the business looked in a particular way, so that we can kind of try to map or recommend a variety of potential use cases for AI. And we ultimately landed on helping them build a platform that would leverage AI for a variety of different capabilities. And so we built Ernst & Young a general purpose AI platform that would allow them to provide specialized knowledge to this platform, and then ask a set of questions with a specialized knowledge. If I backstep a little more before, tools like ChatGPT can be incredibly useful for many reasons, but one of the quote-unquote limitations is that the knowledge it has is the knowledge that the model was trained on, which is all publicly available knowledge available worldwide. And for many use cases, that's exactly what you want. But say you are a company that you wanted to use something like ChatGPT for your own policies and procedures, or to answer questions around specialized knowledge that only your company has. You couldn't quite do that with ChatGPT. And so what we built for Ernst & Young was a platform that would leverage those models, kind of like ChatGPT models, but you can scope the knowledge that it would leverage from specialized knowledge that you can provide on a case-by-case basis. And so this allowed their auditing and accounting teams to be able to start using this tool in very unique ways. In particular, we did some work with the third-party risk assessment team, where a third-party risk assessment would normally take something like between 4 to 6 weeks to complete an engagement. It's a very tedious process. They have to digest a lot of information and then create some reports about the risk assessment. And again, it would be a fairly tedious process, involved a lot of people, and it'd take several weeks of work to complete. With the use of this platform that we built for them, and being able to provide the specialized knowledge and then create these reports automatically from the knowledge that it had, it changed this process from taking weeks and dozens of people to complete to something that could be composed by 1 or 2 people in a matter of a few hours. And so it really opened their mind to the possibilities of what something like generative AI can do to parts of their business, and it's what also led them to say that, you know, they wanted to do something significantly more strategic with us. But that's just an example of, you know, one of the business areas that it was significantly being disrupted by it. And, you know, we're going through a large process right now to almost redefining the whole firm at a scale where they want to try to figure out how to leverage AI in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, just driving efficiencies on a scale like they've probably never seen.
Yeah, I mean, if you get sometimes efficiencies at a 10 or 15%, that's amazing.
That's
but
great.
when you're talking about, you know, orders of magnitude, and something went from weeks to a few hours, and, you know, dozens of people to a couple of people, the magnitude and scale are completely, you know, it's almost incomprehensible until you see it, and then, you know, it really opens your eyes to a lot of opportunity.
Certainly, definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Abe. Appreciate it.
Thank you.